Hi, I'll continue from the last video on the chapter on the brace from Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's Versuch über die wahre Art, das Klavier zu spielen. At figure 69a we see its sign, so that small 30-second note is always a 30-second note. That, by the way, what I just did, the roll of honour need to address that, because if they don't, it means what they have, that means that what they are presenting as the official education is completely incorrect, and it needs to be corrected. And one way to do that would be if these videos were brought to their attention. And the interpretations that I've posted, that playlist, the concert in the world of music, or the other one for connoisseurs with the Appassionata and the Waldstein and the F major sonata, the fantasy and the C minor sonata, they can be presented in front of the roll of honour with the telling them, this guy says you're no good, and here he is. This is his these are his interpretations. He says you're no good, and let them see that and watch their faces drop when they see my interpretations, those performances going beyond anything they could even ever conceive of or imagine. And they wouldn't even know what sort of practice to do to achieve what I achieved there. And they would tell them, because they won't know what to listen for, tell them to listen to the voice leading, tell them to follow the bass, the soprano and the middle voices. Tell them to listen to the length of the notes. Tell them to pay attention to the harmonic tension. Are people able to feel harmonic attention? Are people able to hear the harmony? But if you hear all the voices, you'll start to hear the harmony and hear the phrases. Are they able to tell the length of the notes, what the length of the note is? Are they able to tell when a phrase begins and where it ends? Because you're not used to hearing phrases in their proper length from the roll of honour. They can't play a phrase with its proper length. They're not able to do it. None of them. There's not a single Sokolov Kissin. It would need to be addressed. At figure 69a, we see its sign. So that small 30-second note is always a 30-second note. And I'll be playing the examples. But I have to say, the tones on the piano aren't equal. And the keys are slow. Especially that range between middle C and the C above. The F, G, A. They are slow and the G sticks out. And if you think of that example, when the three Gs are playing in sequence at such a speed, they'll stick out. And when the F is a slow key, and all, they stick out, and so the other notes are going to get swallowed up. They overshadow, they overpower the entire thing, and then the scharfe is obscured. The effect is obscured because the piano is deciding it wants to bring out the G, whereas bringing out the G is not, the correct answer. So in 69B, Bach writes out its execution. One could notice how Bach didn't use a staccato note for that. Not that that's necessarily a useful observation. One could again think of paragraph 19 from the chapter on ornaments in general, when he says about the brilliance of the ornament should be bringing out, or about the brilliance the ornament should be bringing out being hampered when too much time of the note is left over. When thinking about that. So one can think about that in relation to this ornament and generally what can happen. That can be connected to what Bach says in his appendix about how the novice will bring in the brace too early, and what happens is what naturally happens, and you'll hear it in the roll of honor constantly. Doesn't matter who on the roll of honor you listen to, whether it's Kissin or Sokolov or anybody else along the line, their braces are too slow. And what happens is when you bring in the brace too early, I don't know what it is, but you're naturally going to be filling out the note, and the more space that's left to fill out the more spread out the notes that fill it are going to be. So what you'll end up is with a slow brace naturally, and the only way to counteract that is to introduce the ornament later, so there's less space to fill. And this is the stuff. This is stuff that doesn't exist in the world of the metronome and playing it slowly and all. This is, like snapping your fingers. You cannot snap your fingers slowly. You can't do a slow motion snap of your fingers, because the snapping of the fingers happens when all the conditions are in place. And this is something that the metronomes have no conception of. And all those, people in the cage who put out like super slow practice, super accurate, super slow, they have no conception of any, of these elements being a phenomenon that occurs when all the correct conditions are in place. They think it's just like you're a robot, or you're just doing an action faster, and they fail because it's not. You'll never get. It's a false kind of a equivalency, or like a deduction, or they think if they go along this direction, if they start on point A and go in one direction, they'll get to point B, and they have no conception that point A and point B are completely separate from one another. They have nothing in common. Yeah, so one can wonder about that. And then in C are some instances where it can occur. He says it occurs at the beginning and in the middle. One can see in all three examples of C that it is coming in at the beginning. And in the second example of C, one can see with the rest it definitely coming in at the beginning of the phrase, and as well over that D in the middle. So you can see it coming in that second example at the beginning and in the middle, and it's the rest at the start that shows. It's illustrated. That might be why the rest is there in that example. Bach also says it occurs before a progression and a leap. In the first example, we see it coming before a progression. So over the C before the D, before a D. And in the other two examples, we see it coming before an upward leap and a downward leap. Bach gave us an example of it coming before an upward progression, so the D following it is an ascending second. He doesn't include an example of a downward progression, where it's followed by a falling or descending second. So I'm just saying, just pointing that out, not making any conclusions out of that. But it could be, connected that the brace favors an upward, an ascending continuation rather than a downward ascent. It could be linked to that. All the examples of C present notes that are staccato. So just another thing to notice. He then says that it shouldn't come over a final note, even if that note is meant to be short. Finally, Bach says that when dealing with music that's not for the piano, one would tend to see, with these examples, the sign of the trill. And with these examples for the piano, one would tend to see the sign of the brace. So again, a warning that you are not going to encounter this sign, which does not mean that the flicked brace is not the best ornament for cases such as these, when the character of the music demands or feeds off a besondere Schärfe, a special sharpness. Unless, of course, you want to translate a besondere Schärfe as meaning a special ritardando, like Edition Schott wants to, then not. And that can as well be linked again to that paragraph, what he said about what he's doing and how the ornament will be related to the content of the piece, or the character, the type of music that the piece is presenting. So, and there's an appendix to this paragraph. Diese Manier kann auch bei geschleiften Noten über der steigenden Sekunde angebracht werden. Zum Exempel. Sie vertritt hier die Stelle eines Trillers von unten oder auch eines Doppelschlages von unten. Bei dem ersten Exempel kann diese Manier vor einer Schleifung und vor einer fallenden Sekunde vorkommen, weil gestoßene Noten vorhergehen. A. Sollten geschleifte Noten, zumal bei langsamem Tempo vorhergehen, so würde der simple Doppelschlag oder der Anschlag besser sein. Zum Exempel. So, the flicked brace can also be introduced with slurred notes, like the glancing brace, when it comes in over an ascending second or steigende Sekunde. Again, a case contrary to the case that suits the glancing brace. So here Bach is giving us an exception to the rule, basically. Like he said he'd be doing at the start of the book. With Bärenreiter understanding the following note as determining the character of the preceding note, as they have shown in their introduction to this book that is the way they understand it, that in the figure 45 that we've had of the prowl trill, that the G is the falling second because of the F, rather than the F being the falling second because of the G. The D in this example should as well be, for Bärenreiter, a falling second because of the following C, which is clearly and undeniably at complete odds with Bach, who identifies it in no uncertain terms as an ascending second or a steigende Sekunde. Bärenreiter said the G is the falling second, not the F, and that's why Bach should be saying it comes after the falling second instead of before the falling second when talking about the prowl trill. So they understand the F. Because the F falls, it means that the G is a falling second. So as the G is a second, that'll be falling to the F. Whereas it's the G beforehand that makes the F a falling second. When you think it's the following note that determines, or it's the preceding note that determines what the following note is. Bärenreiter thinks it's the following note that determines what that note is. So Bach sees it the way I see it, or I mean, I have learned, I say it like Bach sees it. And so Bach in this example there, with the C, the D, and the C, I think it is. It's the C beforehand that makes that D a steigende Sekunde, or an ascending second. So he's seeing it as the note beforehand determining what that note is. Whereas Bärenreiter, if they think it's the following note that determines, that D is going down to the C. So that D should be for Bärenreiter a descending second, if they remain consistent with what they call in the example the G being the descending second when it's followed by the F. So that D should be the descending second when it's followed by the C. And they would see there that they're completely at odds with what Bach is saying, because he identifies that D. There's nothing ambiguous about it. Bach identifies that D as the ascending second. If Bärenreiter were correct, Bach would be identifying that D as a fallende Sekunde. But he doesn't, because it's not a fallende Sekunde. It's not a falling second. And Bärenreiter should have seen that and thought, oops, we are wrong. Because they are your champions. You look at me and you think, who's this guy? What does he know? You look at them and you swallow everything they tell you. You think they're the experts. If somebody from Bärenreiter was talking in a room full of piano teachers and piano students, what you'd see in the audience is a whole bunch of heads at whatever that Bärenreiter person thinks, when they can't even spot a blatant thing. It's not so difficult. It's not so far removed from where they're looking. They just have to look a little left and right of them, and they'd already see that, hold on, we're wrong. So they'll be saying, with that level of competence, they'll be talking to a room full of piano students, piano teachers and all, and what you'll see in that audience is a bunch of heads nodding, and the, especially the piano teachers, they'll have their little notebooks and they'll be taking notes and all. And they'll be fed drivel, and they'll be begging for more. They'll be, you might as well be feeding them caviar, the way they'll lap it up. I can't help it. They're completely wrong. Did they notice that? And is it just that they know better what Bach meant than Bach knew himself? What do you think? I'd say these instances are indicative of the overall level of competence of the roll of honour and of what they're telling you. This is not an isolated incident. I am not going to be able to move in any of the other in any aspects of piano without the roll of honours complete incorrectness being an issue, because they are incorrect about everything. It's hilarious. And they say, a stop clock tells the time, the right time once or twice a day. They'll manage that when it comes to the time that they, when them as the stop clock would have the right time, they'll change the hands of their clock for that moment. And as soon as that moment's passed, they'll change it back to the wrong time again. It's hilarious. So they're not even as good as a stopped clock. One could perhaps understand the C of that example as being a final note, or a Schlussnote, given there's a rest following the C. So, with Bach saying the flicked brace doesn't occur over a final note, as he did in the paragraph, he goes on to show how it can be introduced over the note preceding the final note. We also now know why the note couldn't be a falling second. So we see it's a steigende Sekunde, an ascending second, it's a D. And we know from what he said at the start of that paragraph 34 why it couldn't be a B before the final note. Why, if it's a B before the final note, you're not going to, introduce that flicked brace. And that you'd be using something different, like the glancing brace, or a regular trill, or a regular brace, but not the flicked brace. Of course, in the cage, you can use the flicked brace, because what's the difference between the cage's flicked brace and the cage's glancing brace? There's no difference. This is similar to what he did in paragraphs 19 and 22, where he says in paragraph 19 that one never finds the brace over a final note that follows an appoggiatura from below. Der Doppelschlag kommt zwar, wie wir Tab 5 Figur 51 bei E gesehen haben, über einer Fermate vor, wo man durch einen Vorschlag von unten hineingegangen ist. Niemals aber findet man ihn über einer Schlussnote, wo vorher ein Vorschlag von unten gewesen ist. Figur 59. And then he goes on to give an example in paragraph 22 where the brace can instead be introduced after the appoggiatura from below that precedes the final note. Wenn man zuweilen bei einer Kadenz keinen Triller anbringen will, so macht man nach dem Vorschlage von unten, welcher in die Schlussnote hineingeht, einen Doppelschlag. Bach saying this ornament acting in the place of a trill from below, or also a brace from below, could maybe be a reference to the use of the trill sign outside of the piano and the sign of the brace with piano material. There will perhaps be a parallel we can draw between Bach saying it can be taking the place of a brace from below and what he is going to tell us in the appendix to the last paragraph of this chapter, paragraph 37, which deals with the brace from below. I thought, as a recap, as part of the service, I'd read paragraph 25 from the chapter on trills. Again, to remind us where exactly Bach said the trill from below occurs. Also kommt dieser Triller zwar überhaupt bei langen Noten, besonders aber am meisten vor Fermaten und Schlüssen vor. Außerdem aber trifft man ihn bei der Wiederholung der vorigen Note. Figur 36a. im Gange, B, und nach einem Sprunge, C, vor einer hinauf- und heruntergehenden Folge an. Man kann durch diesen Triller ganz bequem ganze Oktaven durchgehen und die Fingersetzung wird durch die paar Nötchen, welche im Anfang angehängt werden, ein vieles erleichtert. Bei Figur 38, wie diese Triller mit guter Wirkung gebraucht wird, wenn die Modulation sich verändert. Und bei Figur 39, wie auch in Einschnitten gebraucht wird. In the example we've just had, we see the ornament coming in before an ending. With the example A, we see the flicked brace coming in at the repeat of the preceding note. Bach says it works before a slur and before a falling second, the B, because it has been preceded by detached notes. This is another example of a case for the flicked brace that is contrary to that of the glancing brace. It is exactly the opposite. The sign for the glancing brace would have been written in over the B. And not over the C. Bach calls the C 8 notes, or quavers, he calls them gestoßene Noten, even though there are no staccato dots over them, which is why I'm reluctant to reduce my translation of gestoßene Noten to being just staccato notes. Why that example works will have something to do with the attack of the detached notes in Allegro, suiting and setting up well the attack Bach described in paragraph 33 when executing the flicked brace. I could speculate. And he could as well be referring to the character of the music. And again, we could think of paragraph 19 from the chapter on ornaments in general, that all ornaments require a proportionate relationship with the value of the note, with the tempo, and with the content of a piece. So here is maybe an example of it having a proportionate relationship with the character of the piece, or of that bit. And the sharpness or the schärfe of the flicked brace suiting the fast detached notes, but not suiting the slow, smooth legato notes to the same extent as ornaments that are less sharp. So the less sharp ornaments will be a brace, and then because then in the slower tempo of moderato, he says, if slurred or legato notes come beforehand, then the regular brace, or the Anschlag, which we'll be getting to, and for which I could find no English term, would be better. So I'm going to have to come up with a name for the Anschlag, I feel. This is all about finding its locations in the world of music. There is no such talk in the cage. One simply tackles notes, whatever they may be, with cage activity in a vie to become the ultimate metronome. Diese Manier kann entweder gar nicht gemacht werden, oder sie wird wenigstens nicht leichte ihre nötige Lebhaftigkeit erhalten, wenn sie bei einer Note vorkommt, welche mit dem Daumen, dem vierten oder kleinen Finger gegriffen werden soll. Die übrigen Finger sind hierzu geschickter. The way I see it, Bach here is acknowledging some of the difficulty I mentioned with my caveat. This can be connected to all that was said to the glancing brace regarding fingering. So you could look back on that and connect all that was said about the glancing brace with this. And so that will be, you know, with the thumb not having a finger in reserve, etc. Basically, you need the fingers available. And you'll see Bach at the same time doesn't rule out the possibility here. As you might have noticed in my demonstration of the examples, I'm not sure if it'll be there, but I've had to use tactics and the full resources of AC fingering to counteract the deficiencies of this piano. So one can imagine those repeated Gs at that speed require a key with a fast action. And if that G sticks out, if it is excessively loud, how, at that speed, it can swallow the notes around it or eclipse them when it shouldn't. Man verwirre diese, unsere Manier, ja nicht mit dem einfachen Doppelschlage, welcher nach einer Note vorkommt. Sie sind gar sehr unterschieden, indem der letzte eine ganze Weile nach der Note eintritt und bei geschleiften und ausgehaltenen Noten zu finden ist. Die Figuren beider Manieren beisammen sehen wir unter Figur 70, ihren Unterschied deutlich zu erkennen. Here's figure 70. What we see is Bach using the bow to join the how it appears in the score version with the how it's executed version, as he so often does in these examples. Therefore, I'd be wary again of understanding the bow when it is used in this capacity as a call for it to be played legato. I'm not saying it shouldn't be played legato, I'm just saying I'd be wary of just taking it for granted. And like I've already said, I'd say the same for the appendix example we've had in paragraph 19. That the bows are to indicate that the upbeat G precedes each alternate version. Because if the bows are meant to mean the notes are slurred, the slurring could stand in complete contradiction to what Bach has said regarding some of those ornaments. I'm thinking particularly of the last one, which we'll be getting to later. Bach bases the difference of the two types of braces on not only that the simple brace, which comes after a note, takes place a good while after said note, but also that it is found with slurred and sustained notes. So that's a detail worth noticing and keeping in mind. He based the difference on that the brace, the simple brace, is found with slurred and sustained notes, which would be maybe an indication that when with those two notes that bow does not mean you're looking at slurred notes there. What we've seen in the appendix to paragraph 34 is Bach addressing exceptions, which he told us he'd be doing. The difference illustrated in the two examples of figure 70 is clear. I could imagine it would be the small 30-second note at the start that could cause the error, that people could think it is longer than it actually is. I would say that the Schärfe, the sharpness, the exactness or acuteness, is key to the flicked brace, and especially in those exceptional cases when it comes in before a slur. Generally, you're not going to find it connected with a slur, so this is an exception. And the gestoßene, the detached notes beforehand, kind of create that exceptional circumstance. Yeah, so he says, like he's making, you know, he's anticipating the error that could be made. And, you know, and I was thinking it'd be hilarious. Like, I don't know any instances where that mistake will be made by the roll of honor, but imagine they are making that exact same mistake. It'd be funny because it'd be uncanny. It's like what I've noticed. You know, Bach will be saying about the mistakes that are made, you know, obviously back in 1753, and then I'll look and then I'll see Sokolov defying all likelihood and making those exact mistakes that Bach says the roll of honor make, that Lilliput make back then. It almost seems impossible, and it seems uncanny that Bach is able to point out the exact mistakes being made today by the roll of honor. And I think it'd be hilarious if this was as well. I think, yeah, nobody's going to be making that mistake or whatever. And I think it'd be hilarious if that mistake was actually being made. One could as well, when comparing the text and the later additions to this paragraph in 1787, so additions, not additions, but additions to the paragraph in 1787, think that perhaps in the years between, Bach had discovered new locations of it in the world of music, which he went on to share with us. So, in the time between 1753 and 1787, Bach has lived with this ornament, and since he might have, his use of it might have expanded, or he found new locations where it can be used and took note of it and shared them with us. Yeah. So that's practically it with this chapter. There's one more paragraph left, and I decided to separate it, because otherwise I just decided to separate it, to look at it properly. I mean, it's a bit like, I don't know, you know, like the end of a piece or something. It's kind of, it's easy to not give it the attention it needs because you're practically at the end. It's almost like, you know, you have to remind yourself to pay attention to the end too of a piece. So that's why I left it out, and I'll cover it in the next video. And with that, that'll be the end of the chapter on the brace. So this is part 9, that'll be part 10. You can see, when you think of what you've been told about the brace, or the turn as you know it, you could probably, what you know about the turn and what you've been told about it, you could probably relay in a reasonably short comment. You can see the difference between how Bach addresses the brace and how the roll of honor, how your cage professors address it. And you never know what benefits are going to come out of knowledge. You can't, nobody can know. I'm not able to predict. I'm not able to say beforehand if I need this or not. I'm not able to. If I think this is relevant or not, I'm not able to, because without having the knowledge, without it being present, you'll never know how or when it can be used and to what benefit. That's the difficulty with all this stuff. It's not, it doesn't, you know, with the how to play the piano stuff that I've shared, what I'm thinking in my mind, you know, like if I say about bringing this to the attention of the roll of honor and stuff, I'm not thinking you're going to be so interested in me or my stuff that you're going to want to do that. I mean, you have your own lives to lead. So there's no way I'd ever entertain that notion. But where, like, my idea is with that how to play the piano thing, and it might seem like a little, it's not a lot, because not every video isn't addressing all that, or I'm not going about, you know, all 101 different exercises of a way to improve speed or anything. It's because I have provided the gate, the means, the bridge to virtuosity. And it's not like a, you know, it's not absolutely the ultimate place you can be. Like I said in the introduction, talking about virtuosity with joy, you're not at that level yet, but you are at the level where your virtuosity will match that of Kissin or any of those in the roll of honor. And I figure if you're watching this and you acquire this virtuosity, and all it takes is to discover for yourself what I'm sharing, it doesn't take months and years with metronomes, it doesn't take finger exercises, it just takes recognizing what it is I'm sharing and embracing it. That's all it does. And when you have that, and when you are enjoying virtuosity, a virtuosity that you never thought you'd ever be able to achieve, that then you might be interested in the other stuff I'm saying, and you might be interested in, you know, being a part of it, because you're looking at this. The idea is, with those how to play the piano videos, you're acquiring virtuosity, and then it's with the pleasure of that you're watching that, and that I'll be speaking to you as virtuosos, and and not expecting you to be to be into this with it giving with there being nothing in it for you. So the idea is what's there is a hell of a lot for you, and there'll be a hell of a lot more. And that's why you're interested. And not because, not because I think, I know that you all have your own lives, and there's no reason for you to be interested in me whatsoever. So what I'm doing is I'm giving you something. And that's it's your virtuosity and your like when you sort of see your piano playing transform and you're getting a taste of powers you never even dreamt you'd possess. That's when I'd imagine, that's the ideal. That's where I see the power in this channel. And yeah, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I know that. So it's there, the water is there. Just try it, take a drink and see what happens. And I'll say this, you might think it could be that some people have discovered it and they want to keep it to themselves, like they don't want to tell other people about it. You'd be doing a favor. Anybody who has a wish or a desire to play the piano and be a virtuoso, you'll be doing them a service if you tell them about this channel, because this is the way to that, to achieving that. And I can imagine there'll be people who discover it and they want to keep it to themselves because they'll notice that they're much better than everybody around them. And they don't want other people to catch on and think, hold on, this is the channel. This is where you'll become much better than everybody around you, where virtuosity, where you'll have people baffled at how your level of virtuosity. So I can imagine that'll play a role. But that is where I see the power of this channel. So, plus I think it'd be great if the role of honor, they get away with so much it's ridiculous. It'd be great if they had to answer for something, and just in the interest of improving the service you're paying for. Everybody should be interested in that, in getting value for their money. If you are being told things that just put you in the cage and deny you virtuosity, deny you the world of music, and it'll deny you your entire life. That you don't want that. Even if you don't know you don't want it, I'm telling you, you do not want that. You want to experience virtuosity. You want to experience the world of music. You want to live in that world, because that world, there is no comparison between that world and the cage. And you will see your potential and the limits totally changing, and the possibilities completely changing from where the cage is. There's no possibility. It's all, everything in the cage is a dead end. Yeah, so anybody who's subscribed, I'm very thankful. I'm very happy about that, and I'll keep going. Yeah, I'll be going. My goal is to finish that first book of Bach's and have covered it entirely. And that anybody following this, we can well and truly say we are one of Bach's readers. And you'll see a lot of people talking about in the mind of Bach and all. And you'll be in that position where, you'll see the difference between a passing, a superficial understanding of Bach, and a deep understanding of Bach, or a deep connection to his mind, to the person Bach. And we are hearing Bach talk. All the everything I read out, that is to be considered in its own right. Bach sat there and wrote that. He thought about those words to such an extent that he said they couldn't be better or more precise. They can't be improved on, because he spent enough time on it that he got them where there was no improvement possible. So he sat there thinking about it. These are more, if you were to get a lesson from Bach, you get those words off the top of his head. Not that they wouldn't be as valuable or anything, but here you get the optimized words from him, an entire education. And then there's no comparison between anybody who claims to be, the mind of Bach and this. And that's the first book. I'm intimate with the second book too. It's not just the first book, but the first book is, there's so much that the Roll of Honor get wrong, that the first book, just everything in the first book highlights how wrong the Roll of Honor are. And I think Bach's achievements could be a testament to the effect. And my videos, the pieces I upload, they are demonstrations of the true way to play the piano. Look at them, look past the piano, listen to the lengths of the notes, listen to the voice leading, listen to the rhythm, the harmonic tension, the phrasing, the articulation, the expression, listen for the break in the music, and you'll see that there is none. It goes from the beginning to the end, and even beyond the final note. You can hear what music does to silence. You can hear that in those things. This is the demonstration of the true way to play the piano. And then ask yourself, do you want that for yourself? And none of those pieces needed slow practice. They didn't need finger exercises. They didn't need hand separate practice. They didn't need anything. I just played them. And what I need to do when I learn a piece, or to get it at that level that I record it, I just need to remember everything that I need to do, because sometimes, I can forget. It could be that I have ADHS, which means that, my mind easily wanders. And so I kind of have to make sure that I'm paying enough attention that my mind doesn't wander. So the time I need is to remember everything that I need to do. But I get to play music from the moment I open a new piece till the moment I record it, or till the moment I move on to another piece. From the very moment to the very end is music. And my sight reading, there's very little difference between me sight reading and me presenting my, the finished piece. So when you're looking at the finished piece, my sight reading is close to that. And that's what's waiting for you. These are the benefits that nobody in the Roll of Honor will tell you about, because they're all in the cage. They have no clue what life is like outside of the cage. And they think cage life is real life. They think that. And they'll be forgotten. It'll be like they won't exist. They'll be the people that the cage people of the future will look back on this as the people at the time of Bach, of knowing nothing, of being totally primitive, of not having a clue. That's what your cage professors are going to become in 200 years' time for the cage professors. of what they're telling students about now. All those cage professors, all the roll of honour, they'll all be looked down upon. That's what the cage is. I mean, if the world of music is Eden, what's the cage? And who's behind the world of music? I mean, we're talking about tapping into things, phenomenons that are a mystery. I mean, I just know how to channel them or access them, but how they work, I haven't got a clue. It's a complete mystery. Who or what's behind that phenomenon, the phenomenon of music, the physical phenomenon? How can it be that music can give you superpowers? How is that possible? How can music transform something from being, physically exhausting or to being light as a feather? I have no idea how that works. How can music bend time? I have no idea how it does this or how it can. But what's behind that? And then what's behind the cage? The cage is when you're not needing. If you're not needing, you're in the cage. And people think Eden is, behind the wall. It's not. Eden is outside of the wall. The cage is the thing that's behind the wall. And that's a big misunderstanding that's taught, Yeah, I'll leave that. And thanks for watching. And I'll finish this chapter on the brace in the next video. Thanks. Bye.